Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Spilimbergo Open, which is being held in Italy. Now, the famous YouTuber and aspiring Grandmaster candidate Levy Rozman is back in action. He won a beautiful game yesterday in 17 moves with the white pieces, but today the real test begins. Now, he's playing his first game with the black pieces, still playing against a lower-rated opponent, but based off his recent results, everything should be Gucci. All right, let's jump right into the action. So Levy with the black pieces playing as women's international master Anahi Ortiz Verdezetto, who is rated 2205. Levy obviously wants to try and win this game and keep the streak alive. So we start with the move d4. We get knight to f6 from Levy. Here, I realize the board is wrong, so I'll flip the sides. We have knight f3, and now Levy plays this move d5. After d5, we get c4, e6, knight c3, and now Levy plays the move knight bd7. Now, I really like how Levy has decided to stick with the Queen's Gambit decline setups. In Spain earlier this year, he played the move h6. I believe he also played the move a6 at some point. Maybe it was a slightly different move order, but he's been tinkering with a lot of different move orders, and now he plays knight bd7. Now, playing different variations within a system is definitely something I approve of, because this way you get similar pawn structures, but you're just varying things ever so slightly. So we got pawn takes bishop g5, Levy plays the move bishop to b4, and now we have the move e3. Here Levy goes c5, and we get this move bishop takes f6. Now this move is completely fine. It's not a bad move by any stretch of the imagination, but if this were a top Grandmaster game, most likely we'd see either queen to c2 here or bishop d3, because from a theoretical standpoint, these are the most challenging tries. Instead, bishop takes f6 is played, Levy captures with the knight, we get bishop b5, and now Levy tries to play for the crowd, play for the memes with this move, king e7. Obviously, bro thinks he's Hikaru, and he's been watching too many Bomb Cloud speedrun videos. That being said, in this position, king e7 is a completely acceptable move here, because at this point, white can't really attack the king in the center, and black can go for queen a5 and bishop e6 and bring the rooks to the center of the board very, very quickly. So, we get the move bishop to d3, Levy plays queen to a5, we have queen to d2, guarding the knight. Now the game continues with bishop e6, we get the move castles, and Levy plays rook a c8. Now the reason Levy is doing fine here is because even though the king is in the middle of the board, he has the two b's, he has pressure on the c file, and he's very close to finishing his development. And most importantly, white cannot open up the center of the board very easily. If white were to trade on c5, for example, you take rook c1 and then rook h8 with a double stack and this massive pressure on the diagonal, black is doing great. So, we get the move rook fc1, and here Levy plays this move c4. Now, this is a move that I'm not a huge fan of on a personal level. I would have preferred to see rook hd8 followed by king to f8. It is still fine here, and I think one of the reasons Levy played this move most likely is that he was trying to create an imbalance in the pawn structure, keep a lot of pieces on the board, and make sure that the game would go for a long time. Now, the only issue with this move from the black perspective is you close down the c-file, which you were trying to open up by putting the rook on the c-file, and now the only break in the position belongs to white with this pawn pushed down the road, pawn to e4. So we got bishop c2, Levy plays h6, a3, we get the trade here, and now we have the move rook hd8. Here Levy's opponent plays rook b1, we get rook to c7 guarding the pawn, and now we have the move knight to e5. Now when I talk about the pawn break, the issue for black here is that the pawns are glued here, c3 and d4 and d5 and c4, which means that only white can try to open up the center of the board with an idea like f3 and e4, which means that Levy's moves are much harder and his opponent has a clear-cut plan. Generally speaking, when you're playing someone lower rate, you don't want them to have clear plans like this. So we get the move king f8. f3 is played, Levy goes knight d7, we get the trade, and now we have the move e4. At this point, if Levy were playing a Grandmaster level player, he would be in serious trouble here, because after takes, white has an unopposed big white center here, and Levy has to play bishop a4, trading the bishops. We get the trade, rook to f1, and Levy goes rook e7, rook f4 to guard the pawn, and the move king g8. Now, the big issue here is that you can't target the pawns on c3 and d4 easily, and the pawn on e4 is guarded by the rook. That being said, there are a couple of good things happening for Levy. First of all, the pawn on a3 is always a weakness. Secondly, white can't put this pawn on e5. What white would love is to get a position like e5, king h8, queen f2, king g8, and rook f1 here, because white will have a triple stack, but most importantly, this pawn chain of three pawns cannot be broken. The d4 point is safe. You can maybe get a position like this, for example, just to illustrate it, where the rook guards the base, the pawn on c3 guards d4, pawn on d4 guards e5, so black's position is actually very, very bad here. However, if white tries to play e5 in this position, black can sack the rook temporarily, because if you take the rook, you will lose your queen. So we get the move d5 here, and this is a big mistake. One of the things that you'll notice from stronger players, they're much better at maneuvering and they have a lot more patience. Levy's opponent, she simply loses her patience here, or I could say like focus, and she plays the move d5. What she should have played here was this move queen to b2, simply guarding both the pawns on a3 and c3. If black were to play a move like b6, after rook to f1, or a move like e5 creating the chain, black is in serious trouble here because white is just going to bring the rook over and put massive pressure towards the pawn on f7, and you have this nice pawn chain from c3 to e5. Now, I could go into more depth on that, but just in general, the main long-term issue for black here is that white can even play for something like rook g3, queen f2, and there's just so many issues here with the king and the fact that you can't open up the center of the board. At any rate, Levy's opponent plays d5, and it's clear that his opponent here is trying to force something. She's trying to do something with an active plan versus trying to maneuver the pieces to the best squares. Levy goes f6 here, and at this point, it looks like Levy has kind of unwound the dangerous situation here because now the pawns on e4 and d5 are both super weak here, and they're always potential targets. Additionally, it's very hard for white to bring all the pieces to the king side now to try and create an attack. So we get the move rook g4, Levy plays queen d7, attacking the rook, and now we have the move rook f4, queen d6 is played, and we get rook g4 once again. Now here, Levy plays move queen c5 check. He does not play queen d7, trying to make a draw, because keep in mind, he's playing someone more than 150 points lower rate. If he wants to get to the Grandmaster title, he needs to keep winning games, but most importantly, he needs to win against lower rated players consistently. So he goes queen c5, and now we get this move queen d4, which is a terrible, terrible move. Now, it's clear that over the last 3 or 4 moves, Levy's opponent, she's lost her concentration and focus in terms of what she's aiming for in this game. This is one of the things that at the upper echelons of chess, I should say, that players who are stronger, they can just keep playing good moves. Doesn't have to be great moves, but good, solid moves without committing to anything. And Levy's opponent, first she started with d5, then she goes rook f4, rook g4, losing a tempo, and now she plays the move queen d4, trying to trade the queens off the board. And it's clear that Levy's patience is paying off. So we get takes, now we have the move b5. At this point, Levy is well on his way to a victory because he has a 3-on-1 on the queen side. Most importantly, he's threatening to create 2 connected pass pawns up the board here. And additionally, on top of that, white is struggling here. You might be thinking, well, white has central pawns too. If white could get this position, for example, with the pawns rolling, white would be very much in the game, but you can't do that. If you push d6 here, I take the pawn. If you go e5, I trade and take on d5, and you lose all the pawns in the middle of the board. So pawns here in the center, these 3 pawns, this triangle, they're actually stuck here, and Levy has a free hand to start creating the majority on the queen side. So we get rook b1, a6, a4 is played. Levy goes c3, trying to push the c pawn through, and we get pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn. Now here, Anahi Ortiz Verdezetto makes a big mistake with this move, rook g3. She should have taken this pawn on b5 here, but I think that based on the trend of the game, she must have known she was better with the big white center, but when she lost the thread with d5, then rook g4 and queen d4, I think her confidence probably started dipping here, and she saw the boogeyman. Because after rook takes b5, if black were to play a move like rook c8, you can go rook b1, c2, rook c1, rook b7, and you have the move rook to f4, because after rook b1 and rook f1, now white can start pushing the pawns in the center of the board, and black will not be getting a queen. However, as I said, I think psychologically things have been going downhill, and so she makes a blunder with this move rook g3, and now Levy has 36 minutes on the clock, all the time in the world. All he has to do is find one move, and he will win the game. Alas, Levy does not find the right move here. He plays this move c2 after a 3-minute think, and this is a big pity because one of the things Levy did very well, both in Spain and New York, is he used a lot of time at critical moments, and also, he had a game in Spain, I think against a Cuban IM or GM, which he won, where he had a pass d-pawn, and at a critical moment, he put the rook behind the pass pawn. So in this position, if Levy had played the move rook to c7, he would have won the game here. He would have won, because if white takes the pawn, you have c2, and you're going to get a queen. And after a move like king to f2, you can go b4 here. If takes, you have c2, the pawn gets through again. After king e2 and b3, the best white can do is to take the pawn, give away a rook here, but nonetheless, black has an extra tower and will win the game. And the last line is if you don't do that, you go king d3, I just push p, c2, rook c1, b2, and one of these pawns will get through to the end of the board, and you will win the game. However, my general view is that Levy he thought that he was winning no matter what he did. He felt like he could get the game over with, and he didn't sense the danger. And this is one of the things that if Levy is serious about trying to get to GM level, he needs to focus on every single move. You cannot assume that you're just winning. You have to use that time. You have to look at every possibility, because more often than not, if you make one wrong move, you actually won't win the game, especially at the GM level. So here Levy goes c2, we get the move rook c1, he plays rook c8, and now we have this move d6 here. White is able to start pushing the pawns and creating some counterplay. We get takes, rook to d3. Now White intends to go d7 and sacrifice the d pawn for the c pawn. Levy goes king f7, d7, rook d8, we get takes, and now we have the move rook b3. Unfortunately for Levy, at this point in the game, we're headed for an endgame where he's going to be up one pawn on the king side, but it is a theoretical draw if his opponent plays correctly. Levy goes rook to d5, we get rook c7, rook e7, and now we have this move rook c5, another excellent move here, because if black trades the rooks and goes rook b7, once again, White is going to be able to reach this endgame with 3 pawns versus 2, which is a draw. So Levy takes on d4, we get rook takes pawn, rook to e2 played, and now we have this move h3. As you'll notice, we're in an endgame with 3 on 2. At least Levy has kept the 2 rooks on the board, but nonetheless, if his opponent plays correctly and defends, this will be a draw. We get rook e5, rook b7, king g6, rook c3, rook g5, king h2, rook d2, rook g3, and now finally we enter the endgame with the 3 versus 2. Levy having stacked g-pawns, but a faint glimmer of hope that maybe he can create something. We get king g3, check, king f2, we have rook c6, g4 being played, we get rook c3, king g2, guarding the pawn. Additionally, black can't easily push the pawn to f5. We get king h7, rook d7, rook e3, rook c7. Bunch of random moves here being played. Levy tries to push for g6 and f5 down the road, but he has to make some maneuvering moves. We get the move king f3, rook b7, rook a8. Again, bunch of moves here. Worth pointing out that if White were to play the move king f2 here, this would actually be a big mistake, because after rook to e8 here, apparently computer says after rook h5, I guess this is still probably a draw. Maybe this is a draw with king f1, king f2, but why do you want to get your rook trapped on the edge of the board? So his opponent plays rook to b8, we get g6, check, rook e7, rook b5. Bunch of moves come in again here. We end up in this position where finally Levy pushes f5. Still, as you can tell from the valuation bar, this is equal. We got check, king f7, rook b8, rook d2, king f3, f4, and now the very important move rook b5 to attack this pawn on g5. Levy goes king f6, we get check, king g7, rook b5, king h6, and now the very important move rook to b3 so that White can move the king to the center where the rook will guard the pawn. Levy plays rook h2, we get king e4, rook h1, king e5, and now Levy plays rook a1, and after king to f6, Levy agrees to a draw in this position because the white king is super active here. It's coming into play. If you were to play a move like rook f1, for example, White can actually win the game with rook to h8. Actually, not win, sorry. Or maybe you can win. You get king takes g5, and apparently you win the game due to the mate threat. And if black goes rook a6 check here, you can simply go king to f7, and after king to h7, you start waiting all over the board with the rook. If black ever tries to go rook a1, again, you're going to have the same problem with king to f6, king h6, and White keeps on waiting. So, after king f6 is played, Levy agrees to a draw. It's definitely a disappointment for him, considering that he was winning the game if he had played that move rook to c8. Unfortunately, this game shows how difficult chess is, especially as you're reaching for the stars, because one mistake, missing that one move rook c8, led to a equal endgame where he was unable to convert despite being up one pawn. And this is why chess is so difficult and also, frankly, so stressful, because it can come down to one move, and if you don't play that right move, you can throw everything away. So, Levy draws this game. He still is 1.5 points out of 2, and for the second game of the day, he's playing with the white pieces against an Indian junior player by the name of Arsh Sheikh Sumer, who is rated 2218. Now, this is a very dangerous pairing for Levy. He's playing one of the famed Indian kids. Now, you're probably wondering, what do I mean by that? Now, there are a lot of Indian kids, young players below the age of 18, who are traveling all over the world. They might be playing in Italy, they might be playing in Spain, but everywhere, and in many cases, they are underrated by at least 1, if not 200 points. You see it in many events. The American junior player Abhimanyu Mishra recently played in the World Junior Championship, I believe, in India, and I think he might have drawn against a 2300 rated Indian kid and lost to a 2400 Indian rated kid despite being well over 2600. So when you start getting paired with these types of players who are underrated, it can lead to a very dangerous and explosive situation. So, Levy with the white pieces, we get to move knight to f3, we have d5, Levy goes e3, Bro thinks he's Hikaru, playing the very flexible English setups, English ready, and everything in between. We get bishop g4, c4, c6, and now Levy plays this move queen to b3. Here we get the move queen to b6 being played. Black is trying to effectively stop himself from losing the pawn on d5 or b7. Levy takes, we get the queen swap, bishop takes knight, takes, and now we have the move c takes d5. I'm pretty sure that I've actually had this position in various blitz games on chess.com over the last decade or so. In general, it looks like white's a little bit better with the bishop pair, but the problem is you have two sets of double pawns here, and if black is accurate, you're probably not going to get any advantage. So Levy goes knight c3, we get e6, knight to b5, and now we have this move knight to a6 being played. Now, this is a fairly serious inaccuracy in this position from Arsh Sumer Sheikh. What black should play is the move king to d7, because even though it looks like white is winning a free pawn with rook a7, after takes and knight to c6 and takes, in the long run here, black is going to be able to move the bishop into the game, bring the knight here, and play rook to b8, and white is actually not much better. But we get the move knight to a6, and here Levy plays this move d4. Now, this is a very shocking decision from Levy. I don't know why he didn't sack the rook with rook takes knight here, because after takes, check, king d7, and knight takes a8, white is simply quite a bit better. I really am at a loss for words in terms of why he didn't do this. My best guess is that he probably saw some ghost after this, and knight to e7, but here after bishop b5, let's just say knight to c6 and something like d4 followed by bishop to d2. It feels like white should be better. You're up a pawn on b3. You have the two b's. And at any rate, black can never really be better. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why Levy didn't sack the rook. It is his trademark move. But instead, he decides to play the move d4. Now we get bishop b4 check, knight c3, knight to c7, rook to a4, and now this important move a5, planting the bishop on b4. Levy goes bishop d2, we get knight e7, bishop d3, and after knight to c6, it is clear that the opening has been a massive failure for Levy. Even though he has the two b's here, black has a nice pawn structure in the center of the board. He has his bishop planted on b4. You can't ever break in the center without hanging the pawn on d4. So with no pawn break, a slightly worse pawn structure, Levy will have to be a little bit careful to not end up in trouble in this game. So we get the move king to e2. Now we have the move king d7, knight b5 being played by Levy, trying to trade off some pieces here if he can. We get takes, and now the move rook h to c8. Levy plays h4, and now we get the move h5, rook g1, and the move g6. Now I really like what Levy has done here. He's put all the pawns on the same color as his bishop, so if he can ever reach a bishop versus knight endgame with all the rooks off the board, maybe the bishop can win some of the pawns on the king side. At any rate, we got the move rook c1, king to d6, and now we have the move f4, and here the move b6 is played to guard the pawn on a5. Levy goes rook c3, and now we get the move knight to b4, planting the horse on b4. It's a temporary bastion, but it's looking very unlikely that Levy can be better here. So we have bishop b5, knight c6 back, rook a1, and now we get the move knight to e7. Levy's opponent is trying to bring the knight to f5 to create the classic flying V with the pawn structure, which I missed earlier, but then also a bastion on f5 to fork all of the pawns. So we get bishop d3, rook takes rook, pawn takes rook. Now we have knight f5, Levy trades, and he goes c4. We're in a rook and pawn endgame here. Unfortunately for Levy, the king side is very closed here, and the queen side also is kind of tricky. If white ever trades on d5, black gets a 2-on-1 here, and it's very hard for white to open up the center of the board and start pushing p. So we get the move king to c3, b5 is played, we get the move f3, b4, king d3, and now this move d takes c4, which is the best move that occurs on the board. Levy decides to take with the king here. He could have tried to take with a pawn with b takes c4, but it's very, very risky here because now black has two connected pawns going up the board, and it's very clear that these pawns are much quicker than white's central pawn mass. You can go e4 with the idea of d5, but after king b6, king a5, and a3, b3, king a4, these pawns are going to take a long time to get up the board, and black's pawns should be quicker. So Levy takes with the king, we get king to b6, d5 is played, Levy trying to push the pass pawn up the board, but now we have rook c8, king d4, and this move rook to c3. An excellent move by Arsh, putting massive pressure on the pawns on b3 and e3, and at this point, once again, Levy will have to be very smart to not end up in trouble. Fortunately, Levy does play the move rook b1. He could have considered playing the move d6 here, but after king c6, rook takes a5, and king takes d6, white will lose the pawn on b3 and will have to suffer. So Levy goes rook to b1, guarding the pawn. We get f6 here, another great move, stopping white from entering with the king. And now we have the move rook b2. And here the game ends in a draw after king b5, rook b1, king b6, and rook b2. Now Levy could have tried to gamble here with this move rook to g1 potentially, but it's very risky because even in this position here, Black is pushing the b and the a pawns up the board, and the main issue here is that Black doesn't really have anything else to think about. It's push p or lose the game. So you have one plan to tunnel on, you aren't going to do anything except push those pawns, and if you're wrong with the white pieces, you will just simply lose here because the two pawns are going up the board very quickly. The one other idea Levy could have aimed for was a tricky move rook to d2, with the idea that if Black takes, you can go d6, king c6, and now you have d7, takes, and you have king c4 with the classic fossil, check the king, and pick up the rook on b3. That being said, after rook d2, Black can simply wait with king b6, and white is still struggling to prove anything. Last but not least, you can't ever go e4, because after takes and e5, I take on f4, and then I take on e5, and somehow you've just lost 3 pawns in the middle of the board, and you will lose very soon. So we end up with the game finishing by repetition here after king to b6. Another very disappointing result for Levy, I would say, in this game. But unlike in the second game of the tournament, or the first game of the day, this is not a game where he ever had great winning chances. It's very clear to me that he was playing against a kid who's underrated, definitely should be stronger than 22-18, and Levy just wasn't able to get an advantage. He did miss rook takes a6 early, but there isn't a whole lot to be unhappy about in this game, unlike the first game of the day. So Levy ends up with 2 draws against two 2200s. Definitely not what he was hoping for. He is going to lose some rating points because of this, but at any rate, it's still pretty early in the tournament, and there are 6 more rounds to go. So, on that note, I do hope you guys have enjoyed this recap. I do apologize if the sound quality is a little bit off. I am now in St. Louis, Missouri to play in the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz tournament, which starts in 2 days. So I apologize if the sound is off. I will be recapping my own games alongside these games that Levy is playing as well. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back soon with some more great recaps here on YouTube. See you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.